I'm really excited to introduce you to Bonnie Shaw. Bonnie is someone that I've had the pleasure of knowing for a number of years now, and she is the co-founder and chief strategy and impact officer of Place Intelligence, which is a data analytics startup. But if you're scratching your head as to why, where that intersects with community, well, Bonnie's whole career has really intersected with community, and it's brought her to where she is today. So previously, Bonnie established and led several corporate governments and non-profit innovation labs. She delivered the first impact hackathon at the Obama Whitehouse. She was the head of digital and community at the Foundation for Young Australians, taught a course on media and community building at Georgetown, and has held executive roles in a bunch of tech startups, both here and abroad. Her original background is in city design and engaging communities as in the co-design of their places. And so that has really evolved into her work in knowledge-based communities of practice, all of which relies on what we're here to learn today: community participation and community produced content. So I'm really excited to hear from Bonnie today. As we've said, I hope you have your notepads ready, and over to you, Bonnie.
All right. Hi, everyone. It is lovely to be here. And I'm excited to share some knowledge, some thoughts, and some practice from almost 25 years working in this space. And it was, I had some reflection before I got started on how I'd shape this up this morning. And I have put together a presentation that I haven't used before. It's bringing in a bunch of different examples of work. But I thought the best way to share my perspective on community building was maybe to go back to the start and go through a little bit of a progression through my career, because the work that I do draws on a pretty interesting and divergent set of paths that's not based in any one particular school of practice, but draws on quite a number of quite different areas of engagement. And so I thought I'd run through that. And what I've tried to do is share a bit of theory around some of the work that I'm involved in and that many of you are involved in. And I hope that by doing that, I can give some new information that maybe people haven't come across before that might help in your work. So I'm going to share some slides. And what I would ask is to please, if you have questions throughout, jump in. Let's make it a conversation. Don't wait for me to finish. Just join in, because I know that everyone on here is highly skilled in this work as well, and we all bring our own unique perspectives to this work. So I'm going to share my screen now. And so if someone can give me a thumbs up, I can see.
Yep,
Anne-Marie, you got it. Excellent. All right. So let's jump in and see if I can make this work. So I always like to start a conversation about community by trying to get a feeling and a sense from the people that I'm talking with about what it means to them, because community, I think, is something that we all experience quite uniquely. And so I just wanted to throw it back to the group as we start for a couple of quick comments. Maybe if you can throw yourself off mute and share a couple of thoughts of what a community means to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a place where people can come together to belong.
Beautiful.
I would even add to that, like having a shared purpose and outcome as well is really cool.
Yep, amazing.
I'll also add, oh, sorry. Who did I? I'll go quickly. I think it's just a great support group that can come in and pick you up anytime you need to keep going where you have to go.
Amazing.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about mythology, and I think community is tied together with a shared mythology, and it's the most important thing.
See, Mel and Paz, this is why I love this group so much. You are all my people. It's awesome. Thank you. So The way I tend to frame it up is through these 4 things. So around identity and belonging and participation and reciprocity or reward. And often the participation and reciprocity result in this sense of identity and belonging. And so you can set up this beautiful feedback loop of people feeling part of something and participating in that group, and then continually having that sense of identity reinforced. So when I'm trained as a landscape architect originally, an urban designer, which isn't probably what you necessarily think of first off when you think about this kind of work, but place is a critical driver for community. It has been since the dawn of civilization. And when you look at the definitions of community, it really falls into these 2 distinct areas. And one is a place-based group who come together around a particular location. And so they're in some ways forced to become self-identified as a community because of their proximity. The second is this kind of a group that's based around affinity. And so they share common interests and either perceive themselves or are perceived as distinct from society at large because of those differences. And going back in time, religion was one of the biggest kind of defining ways for community identity. But increasingly now, we see professional groups forming around brands, interests, and this is kind of absolutely skyrocketed since the internet made it much more possible for us to connect online. And so when I kind of go back and I was trying to think about how to talk about this, the first place that I started doing some of this work was in storytelling and myth making, and this idea of sort of co-creating myths about who we are and what we do. And one of the kind of core practices, one of the foundational pieces of theory around this is the Hero with 1,000 Faces, Joseph Campbell's kind of defining work around the meta myth and the stories that we tell each other. And you see that referenced in all sorts of campaigning and engagement around community practice. The second piece is around place. So I'm trained as a landscape architect, and my academic training is very much in around how people make meaningful connection with where they live and how you can leverage that to drive deeper engagement in community and self-government and self-governance. And in that practice, there's an absolute mountain of theory about how you work with communities to co-design places, and the IAP2, if you do want to take some notes, is a great place to start, and has quite rigorous structure around how to co-design with communities that really prioritizes equitable engagement, and is really drawing on this idea of participation as a way of driving ongoing ownership in where people live and the communities that they're part of. The other piece I wanted to reference in this space is some work around bonding and bridging, which comes out of social capital theory. Probably the best known researcher in this space is a guy called Robert Putnam, who has a book that I think is critical reading for anyone working in communities, called Bowling Alone, about the decline of communities in the US since the 1950s. But bonding and bridging capital is really this idea of how communities come together in and around difference. And you'll often find groups that are highly bonded, that have lots in common, and then groups that bridge, so that are more divergent, that move between those deep similarities. And understanding and being able to identify when that's happening can be really powerful when you're crafting strategy to engage different groups. The third place, so moving into kind of co-design about places, I got deeply fascinated in human psychology and what's motivating people around participation, and what's driving their behavior. And so going like right back to sort of understanding the motivations and needs that people have for satisfaction, and looking at that kind of really core understanding of motivational psychology. And then the second piece around rationality and irrationality, and looking into things like behavioral economics and the physiology of decision making, and the reference here from Wait But Why about the instant gratification monkey. If you haven't seen this, again, absolutely critical reading around what kind of drives people into making decisions. And so when you're trying to engage people, having a really clear understanding of what is motivating them to participate in something is absolutely fundamental if you're going to grab their attention. From there, I went into game design, and spent several years as part of a really active community of people across Australia, the UK, and the US doing big gaming or street gaming, where we would do things like dress up as Pac-Man and chase each other around the streets of Manhattan. And the game that I built ended up engaging tens of thousands of people in hundreds of cities around the world in a photographic treasure hunt back in the very early 2000s, before the iPhone, before social media. And so we were playing online and in streets around our communities, and able to get really deep into this kind of intrinsic motivation for participation and storytelling, and identity, and what kind of drives that. I'm not going to go into the detail, but I wanted to throw some stuff in here around the mechanics of designing games, because really it's about setting a list of mutually agreed rules that people agree to follow to a mutual outcome. And so, Mel, I think it was your comment around this shared purpose. And so understanding what we can draw from games, which really should be fun, quite lighthearted experiences, to take into things like an advocacy frame or a community engagement frame, can be really powerful. From games, I ended up working in advocacy and had the opportunity to work with the team behind some of the early Obama campaigns, and from a background of political organizing, and there is no better oiled machine than the political fundraising and political organizing scene in the US. And this crew have some absolutely incredible tools around driving awareness through acquisition engagement and into kind of ongoing advocacy on behalf of their constituents. And so I think that the point here to maybe pick up on is the need for some really strong and clear mechanics. So once you've kind of got that great story, that shared purpose, there's this really critical and an understanding of that motivation, this really critical need for some really robust mechanics to power that ongoing communication and activity. I also threw in a reference here to the work of Marshall Gans. He's a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School. He was a critical advocate in the civil rights movement in the US and was the architect of a lot of the Obama 2007 campaign. All of his work is very well documented, and you can find it here. And in terms of identifying ways to really hone that message and shape that shared common purpose, and then move people through this funnel of engagement, there's almost nothing better around. I then went into advertising, as you do, and worked on some pretty great campaigns in the early days of sort of Facebook advertising. This is from a campaign that we delivered with Hilton Hotels Embassy Suites in the US. We broke Facebook through this campaign. We were adding hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of new followers to the Embassy Suites page every second. and I think we took them well over 200,000 new followers in under an hour of launching this campaign, which back in kind of 2010 was a pretty big deal. We did it by offering, it was a leap year. The campaign was 366 days of more. Their whole vibe was about offering more. They had double room suites and free breakfasts, and we allowed people to gift a free room to a friend. And so it was this incredible opportunity for people to demonstrate their generosity and participate in this great experiment of sharing and being generous, which was a direct representation of this brand's mission, and was held up as a pretty successful campaign. And in this one, it was really, I wanted to kind of touch on this idea of how we grab people's attention and leverage that through some very strong mechanical flows to be able to drive that engagement in a way that is systematic. And then the last piece I wanted to finish on before I jump into some actual campaigns is where I kind of found myself before joining Place Intelligence, was in this corporate and government innovation space. And being able to pick up and work with a whole range of different teams inside organizations and apply the same kind of body of work and practice into developing new ideas, either in corporate financial services or in the public sector, and moving people through these quite structured programs that are continually going back into their personal and corporate motivations, and building these really strong communities of practice that are about knowledge sharing. And so really, I think as I kind of come back through all of that body of knowledge and drawing on all of those incredibly rich and diverse streams of practice that each have this sort of incredible historical background of theory and experience, the summary that I come back to is this idea of always understanding kind of what is it that you're offering people about a sense of identity, and the way that they feel like they belong in this group, and how is that represented through participation, and how are they rewarded for that participation. And so I wanted to jump quickly, and Mel, give me a time check if I'm going over, but I wanted to jump into a couple of examples from my career, and really these touch on all of that theory and that practice in these pieces of work. So the first one is my role at the Foundation for Young Australians almost 10 years ago now. I was brought in to help build the digital team and build the digital community of young people across Australia, with a focus around entrepreneurship, innovation, and social impact. When I started, there were about 9,000 young people engaged in various programs with the foundation. Less than 12 months later, we'd built that to well over 1 million active participants that were actively participating either through content creation or participating in various programs that the organization was running. If we counted kind of views in kind of likes and all sorts of things, it would be well into the tens of millions. We did it on a pretty small budget with a very small team. And so some of the ways that we did that, we started with a burning platform. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? And in this case, it was that young people were being left behind, and that they were not being prepared for the future, and that they were ready to go. And so we had this really strong advocacy lens that these were critical, we were working on critical skills and empowering the people to build the future. And we had a set of principles that, and I pulled these from a slide deck that is now almost 10 years old. So this is how I was communicating to our executive and our board. And we would always start the presentation with this. So young people were always number one in everything that we did, front and center. Whenever we had the opportunity to communicate, it was by the community for the community. And so if we were creating content, we would bring young people in to write it or film it. And it would always be in their voice, not the organization's. We would laser focused on acquisition. And so we acknowledged that that was within a spectrum of activity, but in this phase of the work, it was really focused on acquisition. So it was always driving to some kind of action that people could take that would allow us to contact them again. And in this case, we were trying to drive them into the organization. This, at the time, the organization had a range of diversified products. We were trying to bring everything back into home and consolidate. And so we did that with a bunch of different ways. We built a brand new website, and I built out a team skilled in content creation and storytelling. And so we were trying to tap into current activity in the news and critical things that were topical in society at the time, and building content that we could engage people in. And we were hiring either full-time or on spec young people to create that content. One of the teams, and led by a woman called Bridget Canny, an exceptional storyteller and filmmaker, was responsible for a program called Propeller, which was investing in these absolutely incredible short films about young people running amazing projects around the country. You can still find them online. I really strongly encourage you to go find them, but these were very high quality. They ran to about 15 minutes and were absolutely beautiful. They had a corporate backing from Samsung, and we were able to leverage that for really high levels of engagement, hundreds of thousands of views. And so it sort of set this standard of premium content. We're also, so cast your mind back to 2010, we were building out our Instagram following here. One of the ways that we were trying to do that was by commissioning young artists and giving them a platform. And so paying them to create content and taking over our channels for a week and using that to leverage their followings. And back in those days, influencer marketing was nowhere near as highly developed as it is today. And so we were really experimenting with that as a technique, and always kind of going back to this voice of our community, and letting us be led by them. And so we moved through this spectrum of really, really high quality produced content into something that was a bit faster, a bit of a quicker turnaround, less investment, and then down into direct community produced content. And so in this case, this was for a particular campaign called Innovation Nation. We went out to our alumni and asked them to share their stories and put a call to action for young people to participate in this particular campaign. And each one of them were then able to leverage their communities and their followings. And we were able to reach a very, very wide audience very quickly by drawing on this sense of belonging that our alumni network had to this community. The next one I wanted to touch on, hopefully some of you are familiar with the work from the Melbourne Innovations Smart Cities teams. This one, we took it from about, I was leading this team for several years, and we took the community here from about 11,000 people that would attend an annual festival and participate in a couple of programs to well over 2.5 million people within 3 years, again, on a pretty short budget, and very much drawing on this understanding of the motivations of the people that we're engaging with, and giving them a platform to really share their own identity and be rewarded through this work. So the first thing was the development of the Startup Action Plan. So again, starting with this kind of burning platform, what's the big problem that we're trying to solve here? And in this case, it was around creating a policy environment that would support innovative business to thrive in Melbourne. This document, which is finished up at the end of 2021, was co-written with about 600 people from across the startup ecosystem. My team led that process. We ran many workshops and worked with a lot of different groups to put this together and understand the needs and critical challenges of the community. And then we went into a series of programs for implementation. One thing I wanted to touch on, some of you may have seen this, and I'm just going to jump into this. Can you still see my screen? Yeah. So this is the startup photo library, and this is accessible to anyone. It's a set of images, beautiful, high quality images that are available under a Creative Commons license that features a whole bunch of people from the Melbourne startup ecosystem in a range of different settings. And it came about because that document that I showed needed to have photos in it. And originally the plan was to, let's find a different one. The plan was to use stock photography or stage photos with models. And it was a government document, so there was a relatively significant budget behind it to make it a really high quality piece of work. And when I heard that that was the case, I suggested that maybe we want to think about it a different way, and got together with the good people at that startup show, Anna Reeves, and we made a few calls to people that we knew, and we were able to very quickly pull together our own photo shoots using people from the startup ecosystem in Melbourne, and build this library, which has now been reinvested in multiple times by LaunchVic and the state government, to continue creating these images, which when they're used need to be referenced with the people and the startups that are featured in them. So this is now being used thousands of times around the world every day, which is providing this incredible platform for all of the businesses featured in it. And again, is this kind of representation of for the community, by the community. If you've got the chance to share the work of the people that you're serving, take it at every possible opportunity. I'm going to jump into maybe the Melbourne Knowledge Week Festival here. And this festival is something that we sort of redeveloped over my time at the City of Melbourne, from something that was pretty academic, lots of people on the stage talking about research and interesting stuff, and really transformed it into this fully immersive experience. And the brief that I would give my team each year was, I want to be able to see it and hear it and sit on it and touch it and taste it. And so we went from kind of a lot of these kinds of big presentations through to things like building our own restaurants, and implementing a whole range of interesting things like street closures, where we would invite a whole lot of people to come in and showcase the work that they're doing in future cities or the future of work, or different types of experiments. And always providing this opportunity to try and teach people some new things about what was going on, and provide a platform to promote all of the different organizations that we were collaborating with in this space, and provide feedback to learn from. And so it was this amazing platform to really enable anyone in the community to have a role in shaping what this event could be. I can see a few questions coming in. I'm just going to finish briefly on the work that we do at Place Intelligence, and sort of how I'm picking up and translating this work into the work that we do here. And this work, where we work with built environment practitioners, so it's my background. I've come home but have brought a bit of baggage with me. And so what we do is we provide advanced location intelligence to people working in the built environment. We're using very, very large data sets processed with some artificial intelligence that we've built, and then work with architects and town planners and designers of all kinds to use that information for better city design and better environmental responses and asset management and all sorts of things. And to do that requires the development of a whole range of new skills. And so we're working with these incredible practitioners, and a big part of introducing this new tool into their work is around building new skills and supporting a new mindset in organizations so that it can have real impact. And so the first thing that we're doing to really support that is starting to tell the stories of the practitioners that we're working with. And so whenever we work with a new client, one of the first things that we do once we've delivered the work is we go back and we interview them. And so we're starting to build up this body of storytelling in the words of the people that we work with, to be able to share their insights and help the people that we work with to identify as part of this new group of practitioners that are really pushing this industry forward. And so this idea of the data hero, the celebration of these risk takers, is a critical part of this new work. And so again, I'll just finish on this slide, this idea that whenever we're thinking about the motivation of the work that we're doing, it's really coming back down to this idea of giving people this chance to identify and belong to a group, and then finding these ways to allow them and to encourage them to demonstrate what that means to them, to be continually rewarded for that. And then I will finish. And so I've got a bunch of questions here, and I apologize, they just started to pop up.
No, we love it. Thank you, Bonnie. That was really rich in insights and experience. You know, I totally agree with what Lex said in the chat, where we're just like blown away by your experience and inspired by what you have to share. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
We have a lot of questions, so I'm going to try and get stuck into them, and I will deprioritize mine. So everyone else, feel free to keep jumping in. All right. I think that the first kind of question, or a nice place to start, is a question from Melanie on what was the biggest barrier to entry or factor that created hesitancy for your community to engage with some of these content creation campaigns. So if you cast your mind back to the FYI campaign, or even, you know, some of the Melbourne Knowledge Week work, like how did you what challenges did you face and how did you overcome those?
So thinking about FYA, there's, I think, one of the challenges around representation. So if you go out and say, you know, the Innovation Nation campaign was all about getting young people to share their big ideas to shape the future. I think during one of the several federal elections ago. And there was, when we started, we saw some hesitancy in uptake in that. From particular groups. And so we prioritized outreach to alumni and to high profile people that were representative of the types of people that we wanted to engage, and made sure that they were really front and center in some of the advertising and campaigning work that we were doing, so that it was really clear that those types of people were welcome and prioritized and would be listened to. And so I think representation is absolutely critical, and you can do that in ways that are really subtle but really powerful. So the startup photo library, if you have a look at it through there and have a bit of a flick through the photos, you'll see that in most cases there's a very diverse group of people in a range of different layers of diversity. And if you also notice the staging of the shots, so they were quite staged, certainly in the first several photo shoots that we did. And you'll see that in most of them, then there'll be a woman holding a computer or a screen and demonstrating to a group of people, and that there's always a different kind of range of people represented in there, to make sure that we were demonstrating our intent at every possible point. That makes sense? Does that answer it?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Well, it made sense to me, but yeah, Mel, feel free to. Oh yeah, she's nodding. Cool. And then Maxi, I know that you said that Mel's question was, more similar to what you said, but I actually think it is something worth splitting out a little bit, because Maxi asked a question about well, how do you engage kind of corporate employees in a more conservative industry? And I can think of few industries less conservative than local government. So I would love
You'd be surprised.
I'd love you to share a few insights. How do you build community when we're talking about a very conservative, very corporate environment?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that you are always going to find mavericks, and they may not look like your pink hair wearing leather jacketed innovation crew that you'll find somewhere else, but the local government is full of wildly innovative people, and it's about really knowing your audience and what drives them. And so in local gov, in part because it is highly regulated and there are very strict structures, people have to get super creative to try new things. And so if you know how to speak to them and you know how to find the language to get them to reveal themselves, then you can find them and harness that and put it to great work around common purpose. So at the City of Melbourne, very early on, we set up an internal meetup group that would meet once a month, and we would find people doing really interesting work that touched the various areas of our remit. And we would give them a platform and an audience, and we would make sure that there were senior executives there. So in local gov, as in many corporate organizations, getting access to the senior leadership is really powerful. And so we understood the incentives that would drive engagement. So knowing that the CEO was going to be in the room meant people would turn up. Also knowing that there would be donuts meant people would turn up. Never underestimate the value of some good snacks, and proximity to power.
I love that. And I think you touched on something that's so important in stakeholder management for community, which is making it as easy as possible for people to opt in, regardless of the type of stakeholder, a normal person that they are, right? And kind of playing to people's, dare we say, ego, of if you have champions internally, Maxi, who want to be seen as innovative or want to be seen as cultural community leaders, as Bonnie's touched on, bring them in to kind of leverage them and their influence in the community itself.
Ego is such a critical component of motivation. So if you go back to the kind of psychology of what drives people to do things, ego will sit there in first or second spot every time. And it may not be personal gratification that they're looking for as their kind of outcome, but there is a personal pleasure that will come from some form of participation. So if you're there to serve others, and you get the chance to do that, that is a personal reward. I love teaching. I've had the opportunity to have some pretty amazing experiences throughout my career, and I really enjoy being able to share that and see other people not have to go through everything that I did to be able to learn some of this stuff. And so I get a kick out of this. That's why I'm here. But it serves a broader purpose as well, hopefully. But yeah, that motivational piece is it's absolutely critical to doing this work, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, I want to smash through a few more questions before we run out of time. Question from Lex. You're, someone who obviously sees opportunities everywhere, but how do you prioritize with all this stuff you're doing?
I'm getting better at that. For a long time, I didn't, and I don't sleep very much. There's been, I think, in a professional sense, really understanding what the challenges are that you're addressing. So at FYA, it was this critical skills gap and a lack of representation for young people in policy. At the City of Melbourne, there was a significant lack of support for startup organisations and funding, and a whole range of other failures in the market at the time, which we started that piece of work around about the time that LaunchVic was formed, and worked really closely with them. And so you've seen the change in the ecosystem that's occurred over those several years. And but being really laser focused about that. I, coming from kind of a pretty creative background, I know how important it is for people that are working in creative spaces to have a platform to share their work with an audience. And so going back to the games work and the interactive theatre work, the ability to let people create, to share it with an audience. And so that's really one of the big sort of motivational drivers around the work for Melbourne Knowledge Week, was to create this platform for creative technological producers doing weird and wacky stuff to get access to an audience of people. And so each time understanding what that priority was. Working in a corporate innovation lab, I was one of the early hires at the Capital One Bank Innovation Lab in DC, and there was an absolute critical focus there around understanding innovations that were coming out of the various business lines of the bank and being able to transform them into new product. And so having that kind of clear set of strategic principles to evaluate what you're doing against, I need like bumper rails, like a kids bowling alley. Like I'll go big if I don't have those. So with our work at Place Intelligence, it's very much around supporting practitioners with access to the skills they need to use this data in their work. And so I have them written on Post-it notes all around my head, just off screen, the things that I will and won't do. And so when a new opportunity comes, I'm constantly checking it to see if it fits those principles.
I love that, and thank you for not saying no to us when we asked you. This was on the Post-it note. I completely agree with that. I think something that comes up in Community Collective all the time is everyone's roles are infinite, and there's an infinite amount of things that you can be doing. So I love even just the old school, mentality of making it super visual and super clear for yourself as a bit of a guardrail. All right, we've got time for one more question, and then I'm going to hand back to Paz. So I think Mihi's question is a great place to end, which is, with the knowledge that you've gained over the last few years, like what is something that you wish you knew when you were early in your journey, maybe with the FYA work or otherwise?
Oh, that's excellent.
Save the best till last.
Yeah, I think there's one thing: hire well if you can. Being able to lead a group of really talented people is such a joy and such a blessing. And in every single one of those projects that I showed, the people that were responsible for delivering a lot of that work were absolutely incredible. And understanding, again, I always go back to like, what are the critical motivations that people have? And I apply that to my teams as well. So someone like Bridge, who I mentioned, who was responsible for those beautiful films, she came to work for me at the City of Melbourne as head of narrative in some of that work. And knowing what her incredible skill set was and finding a way to position her to succeed was something that was a real joy for me to be able to do. and Kate Callingham, who's responsible for she was the festival lead for Melbourne Knowledge Week. We would sit down and I would have these conversations and be like, I want to do this thing. I think it should go in this direction. And she would take it and run with it and be able to shape it into something real. And finding those people to be able to collaborate with and augment your own skill set with is probably the most critical thing, because there are definitely things that I am not good at and things that I am pretty good at. And so finding the people that can complement those skills and having that kind of little team that you can scale up, which I think you guys are clearly doing very, very well here, Mel and Paz. And then I guess the other piece is document and track your impact. And so I'm terrible at doing that. I used to be terrible. So that's why there's no examples of work earlier in my career. And because I ran a photographic community competition game for 3 years, and I've got about 3 photos left. And because we just didn't take the time to do it. But having the ability to return to some of the beautiful documentation of the Melbourne Knowledge Week work and the FYA work allows you to then reflect and learn from it and build on it. And so I guess those would be my 2 things: good people and tell your own stories.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Bonnie. That was amazing. And I'm going to pass it back to Paz.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Also just echoing a huge thank you. I really love those kind of takeaways of, hire well and document and track everything. I think that's absolutely bang on advice. So